You have tried everything, everything that felt like love, everything that made sense, everything the reasonable, caring, emotionally intelligent version of you could think of. You have been patient, you have been understanding, you have made yourself available and warm and non-threatening, and you have communicated your feelings clearly, and you have given space, and you have shown up consistently, and you have done every single thing that should work with a person who is capable of receiving it, and none of it moved them. Not the way you needed it to, not in the direction of the choosing, the showing up, the sustained presence that would turn what exists between you into something that actually functions as a relationship. The warmth came and went. The walls went up and came down and went back up. They almost arrived and retreated, over and over, while you kept doing the reasonable, loving, emotionally intelligent things that kept producing the same result. So today, we are talking about something different, something that is going to feel wrong when you first hear it, something that is going to conflict directly with the instincts that have been running the show, something that the caring, giving, endlessly patient part of you is going to resist with everything it has. We are talking about the cruel thing, the thing that actually moves an avoidant when nothing else has, the thing that feels like the opposite of love and turns out to be the only language their nervous system genuinely understands. And before you decide you already know what this is, you probably do not. Because the cruel thing is not what the strategy content tells you it is. It is not a technique. It is not a calculated move designed to produce a specific reaction. It is something deeper and more real and more permanently transformative than any of that. But we start with the cruelty. We earn the reframe. Let's go. Why? Everything soft has failed. There is a reason the patient, understanding, emotionally available approach has not produced the result you needed. And it is not because you did it wrong. It is not because you were not patient enough, or understanding enough, or emotionally available enough. It is because the approach itself, however genuine, however loving, was fundamentally misaligned with what the avoidance system actually responds to. Here is the core of it. The avoidance defense system does not register safety through softness. Softness, warmth, availability, consistent emotional presence, the demonstrated willingness to stay regardless of how the dynamic is functioning, does not communicate safety to the avoidance nervous system. It communicates something else entirely. It communicates that your presence is unconditional, that your investment is not contingent on the dynamic meeting any particular standard, that you will be there regardless, that the relationship absorbs everything, that the walls, the retreats, the hot and cold, the in-between, none of it produces real consequences for the avoidance access to you. And a relationship without real consequences is a relationship without real stakes. And a relationship without real stakes is a relationship the avoidance system does not have to take seriously, does not have to risk anything for, does not have to lower the walls for, because the walls are not costing them anything significant. You are still there, warm and available and understanding, on the other side of every retreat. The softness, in other words, has been doing the opposite of what you intended. You are trying to create safety. You are creating permission. Permission for the pattern to continue. Permission for the walls to stay up. Permission for the in-between to remain indefinitely suspended because nothing about your behavior communicated that the suspension had a cost. That is what has to change. And changing it requires something that feels, initially, viscerally, in the gut, like cruelty. The first cruel thing, leaving not threatening to leave, not the leave that is designed to be noticed and pursued, not the strategic withdrawal that keeps one eye on the door and the other on their reaction, actually leaving. The real version, the quiet, grounded, no speech, not performed departure from a dynamic that has not been meeting you, the version that is organized entirely around your own forward motion, rather than around producing a specific response in them. This feels cruel because of what it does to them. And it does do something to them, make no mistake. A real departure, the kind where you are genuinely, behaviorally not performing it gone, activates the avoidance system in a way that nothing else does. Because for the first time, possibly the consequence that their defense system always knew was theoretically possible but had never quite materialized, the actual loss of you becomes real. Not threatened, real, present, felt, in the specific, undeniable way of something that is happening rather than something that might happen. And the avoidance system, which has been managing the relationship from the comfortable position of someone who knows you are not going anywhere, suddenly finds itself in an entirely different landscape. The escape hatch is still there, but the thing the escape hatch was protecting against losing, your warmth, your presence, the specific and irreplaceable texture of what exists between you, that thing is no longer available just by opening the hatch and staying comfortable inside the defended life. It is gone, or going, in a way that is real enough to feel like the thing they always said they did not want to lose. This is the first cruel thing, and it is not cruelty, but it feels like it from the inside, both yours and theirs. Yours because leaving someone you love, even when leaving is right, activates every attachment fear you have. Theirs because the avoidant whose system has been successfully maintaining comfortable distance suddenly encounters the gap between what the defended life feels like and what the loss of genuine connection feels like. That gap, felt acutely not managed from a distance, is the beginning of the only movement that means anything. Not the movement produced by your patient accommodation, the movement produced by the real, irreversible, this is actually happening confrontation with what they stand to lose. The leaving does not guarantee they come back changed. Nothing guarantees that. But it is the only action that creates the conditions under which change becomes a genuine possibility. Because change requires cost, and until leaving was real, the cost of not changing was zero. The second cruel thing, genuine indifference. Not the strategic cool that is really just warm with the temperature turned down strategically. Not the appearing to be okay that is actually carefully managed availability dressed up as independence. Genuine indifference. The kind that develops not immediately, not through decision, but through the actual process of redirecting your investment towards your own life with enough consistency and enough time that the outcome of their behavior genuinely stops being the primary organizer of your emotional state. This feels cruel because of how visible it is. An avoidant who has been accustomed to your investment, who has been, at some level, relying on the maintenance of your hope as the safety net under the defended life, feels the withdrawal of that investment in a specific way, not always consciously, but the system that was tracking your availability, that knew the warmth was there even when it was not being actively drawn on, notices when the quality of your presence changes. The noticing is not abstract. It is felt in the specific way that the loss of something you took for granted is only fully felt once you can no longer take it for granted. Genuine indifference communicates something that no amount of patient, loving, strategically calibrated behavior ever could. It communicates that your emotional life has moved on, that the organizing principle of your inner world is no longer the hope of the in-between resolving, that you are not waiting, not managing the wait, not performing not waiting while actually not there anymore. That communication lands in the avoidance system as a thread of a completely different order than anything the pattern previously contained, because the previous threats, the moments of withdrawal, the periods of reduced contact, were all reversible, all, all existing within the larger context of your sustained investment in the relationship as a possibility. Genuine indifference removes the larger context, and without it, the avoidance system cannot rely on the safety net it had been invisibly, perhaps unconsciously, depending on. The net is gone, and the defended life, which was always more comfortable than it was fulfilling, which always had the specific hollowness of something that protects against pain at the cost of genuine connection, suddenly has to be inhabited without the knowledge that warmth is available just outside it. That inhabiting, without the safety net, is where the reckoning revs, the real one, the kind that does not arrive from your patient presence, but from your genuine absence. The third cruel thing, choosing yourself, fully, visibly, without apology. This is the one that the previous two are building toward, and it is the cruelest of the three in the sense that it is the most complete, the most permanent, the most genuinely threatening to the structure the avoidant has been maintaining. Choosing yourself fully means taking all of the investment, the energy, the hope, the specific quality of attention that has been directed outward toward the dynamic and redirecting it inward, toward your own life, your own growth, your own relationships, your own direction, not as a performance, not as the version of self-focus that is really just self-focus's strategy, as the real thing, the genuine, sustained, this is where I live now, inhabitation of your own existence as the primary relationship in your life. Visibly means not hiding it, not downplaying it, not managing how it looks in relation to them, or softening it for their comfort, or making yourself smaller in the expression of it so they do not feel replaced. Your life expanding, your happiness becoming genuine rather than performed, your forward motion becoming real rather than staged, your presence in your own existence becoming full rather than partial. All of that is visible, not because you are displaying it for their benefit, because it is real, and real things are visible. Without apology means exactly that. The version of you that is fully alive in your own life does not apologize for it, does not cushion it, does not quietly communicate that the forward motion is reversible pending their response. It simply is your life, fully inhabited, moving in its own direction, not waiting. This is the cruelest thing because of what it does to the avoidance internal calculus in a way that nothing else touches. Because the avoidance system has been able to sustain the in-between structure, specifically because the alternative, you, fully alive, genuinely not needing them, actually inhabiting a complete life in which they are not the organizing center, was theoretical, was something you talked about maybe doing, was a possibility that the continued availability of your investment kept from becoming real. When it becomes real, when you are visibly, genuinely, fully in your own life in a way that has nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with actual forward motion, it confronts the avoidant with the thing that the in-between was designed to prevent them from having to confront directly. You are not waiting. You were never going to wait forever. The escape hatch was always going to have a cost, and the cost, now, is visible, tangible, not theoretical. You, happy, growing, moving, without them. What these three things have in common: leaving, genuine indifference, choosing yourself fully. None of them are directed at the avoidant. That is the thing. That is what makes them different from every previous attempt to move the dynamic. Every previous attempt was at some level about them, about producing a specific response, about finally communicating something clearly enough or behaving in a way that was calibrated correctly enough to finally get through. These three things are entirely, completely, non-negotiably about you. They are not aimed at them. They do not have a target. They are simply the truth of what happens when someone who has been organized around an unavailable dynamic finally, genuinely, completely redirects toward themselves. The effect on the avoidant is real, but it is a side effect, not the purpose, and the distinction between side effect and purpose is the entire difference between strategy and transformation. Strategy can be detected. The avoidance system is exquisitely sensitive to behavior that is organized around producing a response in them. It reads the performed indifference. It feels the withdrawal that is still, underneath, waiting. It recognizes the leaving that is really a longer loop of the same reaching, and it responds accordingly, by waiting it out, by knowing at some level that the availability has not actually withdrawn, just gone quiet. Transformation cannot be detected in the same way, because transformation is not aimed. It simply is. And the avoidance system, which has excellent defenses against things that are aimed at it, has very little response to something that is simply true. Your genuine happiness is simply true. Your real forward motion is simply true. Your actual, not performed, not strategic indifference to whether they respond is simply true, and true things reach past the defenses because defenses are built against attempts, not against reality. That reality, your actual, full, forward-moving, genuinely inhabited life, is the cruelest thing. And it is also, finally, the reframe. It is not cruelty. It never was. It is the most honest thing you have ever brought to this dynamic, the most real version of yourself you have ever offered, the version that does not need anything from them to be complete, that is not performing wellness or staging independence or strategically deploying self-focus as a lever, just you, fully, finally, in your own life. And if that moves them, if the genuine reality of your forward motion is the thing that finally confronts the avoidance system with the cost of the defended life clearly enough to produce real movement toward you, then what comes toward you is coming toward the real version, the full version, the version that knows its worth and inhabits its life and does not organize itself around anyone's unavailability. Not the calibrated version, not the managed version, not the version that was performing okayness while privately waiting. You, and that version, the one standing fully in their own life, warm and clear and genuinely okay, is the only version worth being met by. The only version capable of building something real rather than resuming something broken. The cruelty was always the kindness. The leaving was always the love. The indifference was always the truth. And the choosing of yourself was always, from the beginning, the only move that was ever going to matter. Everything else that follows, everything the next parts of this conversation build toward, starts from that foundation. You, chosen, by yourself, first. That is where it begins. Something shifts when you actually do it, not when you decide to do it, not when you understand why you should do it, when you actually do it. When the leaving is real and the indifference is genuine and the choosing of yourself has moved past the stage of intention into the stage of daily, lived, this is actually how I am moving now reality. Something shifts in the dynamic that no amount of understanding predicted quite accurately enough. Because understanding it from the outside, knowing intellectually that genuine self-focus produces a different response in the avoidance system than performed self-focus, does not fully prepare you for what it actually feels like to be inside the shift, what it feels like in your body, what it does to the specific texture of your daily experience, what happens to the relationship with yourself that begins to develop in the space that was previously occupied by the management of the dynamic. And it does not prepare you for what happens on their end, which is not what most people expect, which is not clean or dramatic or the clear, unambiguous response that would make the whole thing feel resolved, which is, in fact, considerably messier and more ambiguous and more requiring of everything the previous parts of this conversation built in you than you might hope. So let's go into it. The actual territory of what happens after the three cruel things become real, after the leaving settles and the indifference develops and the choosing of yourself moves from intention into genuine daily practice. What happens in you first, before anything happens with them, before the dynamic shifts in any visible way, before the avoidance system registers the change and produces whatever response it produces? Something happens in you that is more important than any of that and tends to get insufficient attention because the focus keeps going outward toward them and their response. The bandwidth comes back, not all at once, not dramatically, but in increments that are noticeable once you start paying attention to them. The cognitive and emotional space that was permanently allocated to the management of the dynamic, to the monitoring, the hoping, the calibrating, the analyzing of every interaction for signals about where things stood. That space begins to clear, slowly, like a room that has been cluttered for so long that you forgot what it looked like empty. And as it clears, something becomes possible that was not possible while the clutter was there. You start to hear yourself again, not the version of yourself that was responding to the dynamic, the one underneath that, the one that had wants and directions and reactions to its own life that had been getting drowned out by the noise of the in-between, the one that knew things about what felt good, about what was worth investing in, about what direction felt genuinely alive, that the preoccupation with the dynamic had been consistently overriding. That version starts to become audible, and what it says is not always what you expected. Sometimes it is quieter than the dynamic made you. Sometimes it wants simpler things. Sometimes the direction it points toward is less dramatic and more sustainable than the intensity of the in-between made anything feel. Sometimes it surfaces preferences you had suppressed so long they feel almost foreign. What you actually enjoy, what you actually find interesting, what your life actually wants to be doing when it is not organized around someone else's unavailability. Following those signals, even tentatively, even before they are clear enough to constitute a direction, is the beginning of the genuine self-choosing that the third cruel thing points toward. Not the performed version, the actual, interior, what do I actually want version, which is quieter, more specific, less dramatic, and more real than anything that was produced by the dynamic. What happens in them? The uncomfortable truth. Here is what most people want to hear at this point. They want to hear that the genuine leaving, the real indifference, the visible choosing of yourself produces an immediate, clear, unambiguous response in the avoidant. That the walls come down, that the choosing finally arrives, that the thing you spent so long hoping would happen through patience and accommodation happens now through the simple, powerful act of genuinely redirecting your life. Sometimes that happens, eventually, after enough time, with enough genuine change on their end. But what happens first is usually something different, and if you are not prepared for it, it can send you back into the old pattern faster than almost anything else. What happens first is often nothing, or close to nothing. A silence that is different from the previous silences but that looks the same from the outside. The avoidance system, encountering the genuine shift in your behavior, does not immediately respond with breakthrough. It observes, it processes, it attempts to determine whether what it is detecting is real or strategic, whether the indifference is genuine or performed, whether the forward motion is actual or a longer loop of the same availability, dressed up as departure. This testing period, the silence in which the avoidance system is processing the change without yet responding to it visibly, is where most people lose their footing, because the silence after genuine departure feels identical to the silence that was always there, and the temptation to interpret it as confirmation that nothing has changed, that all the work, all the genuine self-redirecting, all the real leaving produced no movement at all, is overwhelming. It is not confirmation of that. It is the processing period, the time the avoidance system requires to distinguish between genuine transformation and strategic withdrawal. And the distinguishing takes as long as it takes. It cannot be accelerated by checking, by reaching back, by softening the departure to see if the softening produces a response. Any of those actions collapse the distinction immediately and confirm for the avoidance system that the transformation was not real. That it was, as the system suspected, a longer version of the same dynamic. The silence has to be survived, not performed. Survived, with the genuine forward motion continuing, your own life inhabiting reality that produced it, which is only possible if the leaving and the indifference and the self-choosing are actually real. Because if they were real, the silence is survivable, uncomfortable, tender, sometimes genuinely hard, but survivable, because your life has enough actual forward momentum to provide somewhere to be during it. If they were strategic, the silence is not survivable, because there is nothing to be doing during it, except waiting, and waiting in the silence is just the in-between, with the door closed. When the avoidance system finally moves, it will not look like what you imagined. Avoidant movement never does. It will be small, tentative, carrying the maximum plausible deniability that the defense system can attach to it. Something that could be read as nothing if you were not paying attention. Something that requires your familiarity with this specific person and this specific dynamic to recognize as the thing it actually is. A message about something peripheral. A reference to something that connects back to the shared history. A reach that does not announce itself as a reach. Small, quiet, covered. And here is the critical thing about that moment. The moment the small, covered, plausibly deniable reach arrives, the moment you have been moving through the silence for long enough that the shift in your interior is real, and the forward motion is genuine, and the indifference has developed past strategy into actual. The response has to match the transformation, not mirror the smallness strategically, match it genuinely from the place that the transformation is built, which means warm but unhurried, present but not reorganized, genuinely open to what this might become without collapsing back into the previous availability before the evidence has had time to show what this actually is. The same groundedness that survived the silence, the same genuine self-inhabiting that produced the shift in the first place, not withdrawn, not performing indifference that is no longer genuine because the reaching has reactivated the hope, just real, steady, the version of you that has somewhere to be regardless of how this goes. That response, the one that comes from genuine transformation rather than from strategic positioning, is the thing the avoidance system has not encountered before in this dynamic. Every previous response to their reaching came from the place of relief and hunger, the flood of everything that had been waiting to be released, the collapse back into availability that confirmed the system's implicit assumption that the departure was temporary and the warmth was always going to be restored. This response does not confirm that. It introduces something new into the dynamic. The experience of reaching toward you and finding the genuine, grounded, fully inhabiting their own life version instead of the relieved, available please come back version. And that experience, the specific felt reality of reaching and finding something different, is what begins to actually move things, not in the direction of the old dynamic resuming, in the direction of something that neither of you has experienced in this relationship yet. The conversation the transformation makes possible. There is a conversation that becomes available after the transformation that was not available before it, not because the words are different, because the person having the conversation is different, and the person they are having it with, the version of the avoidant whose system is processing the genuine change in yours, is in a different place than they have been in any previous version of this conversation. The conversation is simple, disarmingly so. After everything that has been said and not said and argued and deflected and explained and flooded and managed, the conversation that the transformation makes possible is almost startlingly uncomplicated. It is the honest statement of where you are, not where you were, not the accumulated weight of the history, where you actually are right now in the present tense, from the place the transformation built. Something like, I have been doing the work of moving forward, of genuinely building my own life rather than waiting for this to resolve. And I am in a different place than I was, a better one. And from that place I can tell you clearly, I still care about what was between us, and I am also genuinely okay if it stays in the past. Not performing okay, actually okay. Which means if you are here because something has genuinely shifted in you, because you have done real work on what was driving the pattern, I am open to that conversation. And if you are here because the absence activated the system and the reaching is the response to the threat of loss, I understand that too, and I am not available for that version anymore. That statement, delivered from the genuine, grounded, actually okay place, is not an ultimatum. It is a clarity. And clarity, offered from a place of genuine non-attachment to the outcome, does something to the avoidance system that ultimatums and explanations and patient expressions of need never managed. It removes the game board, the structure that the in-between required, the ambiguity, the escape hatch, the ability to maintain access without choosing, is no longer present. The person in front of them is not ambiguous, is not waiting, is not available for the structure to continue, is simply clear, present, and genuinely visibly okay with whatever comes next. That clarity is disarming in a way that is specific to the avoidance system, because the system was built to manage attempts, pressure, emotional demand, expressions of need that could be deflected or minimized or managed into distance. It was not built to manage the absence of all of those things alongside the genuine, non-needy, warmly clear statement of where someone actually is. The absence of the attempt removes the thing the defense system was defending against. And when the thing being defended against is not present, when there is no pressure, no demand, no flood, no need to be managed, the defense system does not know what to do. It has no protocol for genuine clarity offered from genuine okayness. It was designed for a different kind of encounter. And in the gap between what the system expected and what it actually encountered, in that specific undefended gap, something becomes possible that was never possible inside the old dynamic. The real conversation between two people who are both, for the first time, actually present. Not managed, not defended, not performing, just there with what is true. What the melting actually is, the title promised it. The avoidance heart melting. And it is worth being precise about what that actually means, because the romantic version of it, the dramatic walls coming down, finally choosing, you, everything resolving in a moment version, sets an expectation that the reality consistently fails to meet, and the failing consistently sends people back into self-doubt. The melting is not a moment. It is a process, slow, non-linear, occurring mostly below the surface and becoming visible only in accumulation over time. It is the avoidance system gradually, reluctantly, against all its previous conditioning, updating its prediction about what closeness with you costs. The prediction was, closeness leads to pressure, leads to overwhelm, leads to the loss of the defended self. That prediction was built from the history of the dynamic, from the reaching and the flooding and the chasing and the patient but hungry accommodation that communicated consistently that your investment was organized around them. The transformation disrupts the data the prediction was built on, because the person you are now, grounded, forward-moving, genuinely okay, warmly clear, does not produce the outcome the prediction anticipates. The closeness does not lead to pressure. The warmth does not arrive loaded with the weight of everything that needs them to respond in a specific way. The presence does not require management. Each encounter with that version of you is a data point against the old prediction. And data points accumulate. Slowly. But they accumulate. And as the prediction becomes less reliable, as the avoidance system encounters enough evidence that closeness with you does not cost what it was certain closeness costs, the defense that was organized around that prediction begins to have less to defend against. That is the melting, not the dramatic collapse of the walls. The quiet, incremental, evidence-based loosening of the grip that the old prediction had on the system. The gradual emergence of a different experience of what it feels like to be close to you. One that the system was not prepared for. One that it does not have a script to manage. One that is slowly beginning to feel like something other than a threat. That is what the cruel things produce. Not immediately, not cleanly, but actually, in the real, lived, data-accumulating way that the only genuine change happens. What you deserve to know about all of this. Here is the reframe that everything has been building toward. The one that earns the provocative framing by arriving at something truer than it. None of the three things were cruel. Not the leaving, not the indifference, not the choosing of yourself. The leaving was the most honest thing you could have done. The genuine no conformance, this is where I actually am departure from a dynamic that was not meeting you, is not cruelty. It is integrity. It is the behavioral expression of knowing your worth. It is the refusal to continue communicating through your presence that the dynamic's terms were acceptable when they were not. The indifference was not coldness. It was the natural result of investing in your own life so genuinely and so consistently that the outcome of their behavior stopped being the primary organizer of your emotional state. That is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of yourself, which is the only foundation from which genuine connection can be built. And the choosing of yourself, fully, visibly, without apology, was never cruelty to them. It was the end of cruelty to yourself, the end of the chronic self-suppression, the end of the organized around their availability existence, the beginning of the life that was always yours to inhabit, and that you had been deferring, pending a resolution that the structure was designed to prevent. What felt cruel was the contrast, The difference between what you were doing before, the accommodating, the softening, the endless availability, and what you were doing now. That contrast felt like withdrawal because something was being withdrawn. The performance, the management, the version of yourself that had been making itself small enough to fit into the space the dynamic allowed. That version was not you, and its withdrawal was not cruelty. It was honesty. The real you, the one who leaves when leaving is right, who develops genuine indifference when the investment stops being returned, who chooses themselves fully and visibly and without apology. That version is not cruel. That version is the most loving thing you have ever offered because it is real, and real is the only thing that can be genuinely received. The avoidance heart does not melt in response to your sacrifice. It does not open in response to your accommodation. It does not choose in response to your endless availability. It moves, slowly, reluctantly, against everything its history taught it, in response to your reality, your genuine, full, forward-moving, non-negotiable reality. That is the cruel thing. That is the kind thing. That is the only thing. And it was available to you the whole time. There is a specific moment that arrives after everything covered so far has been understood and practiced and lived. Not a dramatic moment, not a turning point that announces itself, just a quiet, ordinary moment in an ordinary day where something settles in you that did not used to be settled. You are doing something unremarkable, something completely unrelated to any of this. And you notice, without reaching for the noticing, without it being the product of analysis or intention, that you are simply here, in your life, present in the specific texture of the moment you are actually in, not partly elsewhere, not running the background process of the dynamic on low volume underneath everything else, just here. And the here is enough, not in the resigned making peace with what I have way, in the actual, genuine, this is where I live way, the way that is not about the avoidant at all anymore, not about whether they are going to come back, or whether the transformation produced the right response, or whether the melting is happening on any particular timeline, just here, in your life, which is full enough to be fully in. That moment is not the end of the story. It is not the resolution of everything. The feeling does not stay permanently, and the old pull does not disappear completely, and there will still be days when the tenderness surfaces and the absence of what could have been registers with unexpected weight. But that moment, that specific, unremarkable, utterly ordinary moment of being genuinely present in your own life is everything the three cruel things were building toward, not the avoidance response. This, the relationship with yourself that all of this built. There is a relationship that formed in the process of everything described across this entire conversation, not with them, the one you built with yourself, through the leaving and the indifference, and the choosing and the mourning, and the practicing, and the failing, and the continuing anyway. That relationship is the actual output of all of this, not the technique, not the framework, not even the understanding of avoidance psychology that you now carry with such specificity and depth, the relationship with yourself that was built through the process of doing the hardest things. And this relationship has specific qualities that are worth naming because they tend to go unnamed in the recovery narrative, which is too focused on the outcome with the other person to adequately honor what was actually produced. The first quality is self-trust, the specific earned, not theoretical self-trust of someone who said they were going to do the hard thing and then did it. Not perfectly, not without setbacks, but actually, the leaving happened, the indifference developed, the choosing occurred, and the you that said those things would happen and then made them happen. That version of you has demonstrated something to the part of you that has been uncertain about your own reliability. You did what you said in the hardest conditions, against everything that was pulling you back toward the familiar. That is a trust that cannot be given to you by anyone else, cannot be produced by any amount of external validation or reassurance. It is built only through doing the hard thing and surviving it, through promising yourself something and following through discovering in the actual lived experience of the practice that you are capable of what you previously doubted you were capable of. The second quality is discernment, not the fearful, guarded, keep everyone at a distance kind. The genuine, experientially grounded, I know what this feels like from the inside kind. You now carry in your body the specific knowledge of what the in-between feels like, what the ceiling feels like, what the reset feels like, what genuine choosing feels like in its absence, and therefore what it will be recognizable as in its presence. That discernment is permanent. It travels with you. It is part of your perceptual equipment now in a way that no amount of reading or intellectualizing could have produced. You know because you felt it, and what is felt is known in a different and more reliable way than what is only understood. The third quality is the specific hard-won knowledge of your own capacity for fullness, because the bandwidth that came back, the cognitive and emotional space that was reclaimed from the management of the dynamic, got filled with something. Your life. Your actual, genuine, forward-moving life. And in the filling of it, you discovered something that the dynamic's consumption had been obscuring. You are capable of genuine fullness. Your life, fully inhabited, has enough in it, enough interest, enough meaning, enough connection, enough forward momentum. The dependency on the dynamic, the sense that its resolution was a prerequisite for your life to really begin, turned out to be a function of how much space it was consuming. Remove the consumption, and the life that was always there becomes visible, livable, actually, genuinely enough. The avoidance position now, wherever they are in their own process, whatever the transformation produced in them, whether it is early reckoning or active movement toward you, or continued defended distance, or somewhere in the complicated middle, their position now is not the central question it used to be, not because it does not matter, but because your life has developed enough genuine, forward momentum that their position is one input among several rather than the primary determinant of everything. That shift in proportion, from their position being everything to their position being one thing among many, is the clearest possible evidence that the transformation was real, that the choosing of yourself actually happened rather than being performed, because performed self-choosing keeps one eye permanently on that position. Actual self-choosing genuinely has other things to look at. What is true about their position is worth acknowledging without over-indexing on it. They are somewhere on the arc that all of this produced, maybe at the beginning of the reckoning, maybe further along, maybe in the specific tentative, plausibly deniable reach stage, maybe still behind the walls in a way that has not yet produced visible movement. All of those positions are possible. None of them are yours to manage. The transformation was not aimed at their position. It was aimed at your life. And your life is moving regardless of where their position is. If they are moving toward you, if the arc is bending in the direction of genuine engagement, of the real conversation the transformation made possible, of the slow accumulation of evidence that something has actually shifted in their architecture, then what they are moving toward is the real version of you, the grounded, forward-moving, genuinely okay version. And meeting them from that version produces something that the dynamic, in all its previous iterations, never had access to, a foundation, real, built from two people who are both, finally, actually present, not managing, not performing, not organized around the escape hatch or the hope of the in-between resolving, just present with what is true. That foundation is what genuine partnership is built on, not the intensity of the irregular reward, not the aliveness of the almost, not the specific consuming charge of the dynamic that felt more real than ordinary life, because the nervous system was running on anxiety and relief ultimately, but the quieter, more sustainable, more genuinely inhabitable aliveness of two people who are both choosing, fully, visibly, without apology. That is what becomes possible on the other side of all of this, not as a guaranteed outcome, as the thing that becomes possible, the door that the transformation opens, and whether they walk through it depends on where they are in their own work. But the door is open, And it is open because you were standing on the other side of it as the real version of yourself, which is the only version worth walking toward. If they do not come, because the honest version of this conversation acknowledges the full range of outcomes, rather than implying that transformation always produces the return that was hoped for. If the transformation is genuine, and the forward motion is real, and the choosing of yourself is actual, and they still do not come, if the reckoning stays internal, if the architecture does not shift enough to produce the reaching, or the reaching happens but does not develop into the real conversation, or the real conversation happens, but the consistency that would follow it does not materialize, what then? Then the transformation was still worth it, completely, unconditionally, without qualification, not as a consolation, as the actual truth of what the transformation produced, regardless of their response, because the relationship with yourself that was built through all of this, the self-trust and the discernment and the genuine fullness and the grounded okayness, none of that is contingent on their arrival. None of it requires their response to be valid. None of it disappears if they do not come. What you built is yours, permanently. The knowing of your own worth, the capacity to leave when leaving is right, the ability to develop genuine indifference when the investment stops being returned, the practice of choosing yourself fully and visibly and without apology, the 3-second window, the quiet exit, the morning that moves through rather than around, the discernment that recognizes the ceiling and the reset and the theoretical plans for what they are. All of that is yours, built in the hardest conditions, earned through the most expensive kind of experience, permanent in the specific way that experientially grounded knowledge is permanent, and it travels forward with you into the next relationship that has the capacity to receive it fully, into the daily experience of a life that is genuinely inhabited rather than deferred, into every moment where the old pattern offers itself and the 3-second window opens and the grounded, value-knowing, fully present version of you makes the choice again. The cruel thing was never about them. It was always about you, about who you become when you stop organizing your life around someone else's unavailability and start living it as the primary, non-negotiable, fully worth inhabiting thing it actually is. That person, the one you became through all of this, is not waiting for anyone to choose them to be real. They are already real, already here, already fully in a life that is genuinely enough. The avoidance heart may or may not melt. The choosing may or may not come. The walls may or may not come down on a timeline that intersects with your life in a way that is useful and real and buildable. But you, the version of you that exists on the other side of the 3 cruel things, you are not suspended pending any of that. You are here, fully, finally. And that is everything. That was always everything.